and welcome to this open table, Tavola Aperta. I just, first of all, I answer to the question that he did to me. So what is the open table? The open table is a section of the Biennale this year. It's not a performance, but it's a way to explore the artist world and to have the possibility of talk with the artists of their practice and their everyday life and their works. Of course, the pieces exhibited here at the Biennale. It was conceived by Christine Marcel as a part of the Biennale. So it is the first year that we did something like this, and we hosted almost 75 open tables until now. So it's the possibility of meeting the artist, talking about artists. Today we have Marko Pogačnik, David Nez, and Milenko Matanović. And they are exhibiting here at the Pavilion of the Art at the Corderie. You can see the pieces under the name of Hoho Group. And of course, we have a work of Marko Pogačnik by himself. So I would like them to introduce themselves, of course, as individual first, maybe referring a bit about their practice in the past as a group. But of course, I'm sure that the visitors would like to know something about your nowadays work, and so you as individuals, of course, not as a group anymore. About the open table, it is a lunch, so don't be shy and have something to eat and to drink. And of course, it works if everybody do some questions. So don't be shy if there's the microphone. We kindly ask, because they did even a long trip by airplane, and sometimes it's difficult to hear properly without microphone. So Milenko, I did it for you. Thank you. To speak loudly and properly in the microphone, and enjoy the Tavola Aperta. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, who's the first? Okay, let's introduce Marko Pogačnik first.
Can you hear me? Is it the microphone? Okay. I'm Marko Pogačnik, and I am working in art since 1962. There were different times of different epochs in this long time. And one that I share with David and Milenko is the work of a Ho group, first of a Ho movement in the beginning of the 60s, and later the Ho group. This was still 71. And then there is a next step when we created a community, a rural community at Čempas, also in Slovenia, because we were interested how art can live and function within life. So we created a community with a complete agriculture that we did with our families and friends, and also we, as artistic group called Čempas Family. Also we were at Biennale in 78 as Čempas Family. And then a spiritual center, which means make a place where people could get to know about new spiritual movements in Europe and in the world. And then after this phase was finished in 79, I started work by myself, which I work with acupuncture of the earth, which means it's a kind of ecology where I am aware of the wounds that this civilization is doing to different places. I developed a method which is with positioning stones on certain points in the landscape to balance or to revitalize places that were damaged ecologically or by war. I developed a language of cosmograms, which is a way how to contact the consciousness of the place, of plants, of beings, animals, elemental beings. I work with elemental beings of nature. In 97, a new stage opened. I do still this earth healing work, which is when I got aware that the earth is went into a cycle of change. I observed this has to do with the ecological problems of the planet, that the earth is taking a new path of evolution, going towards creating a new space which is pluridimensional. And since then, I work with this. I write books and lectures, and with my colleagues, we create geopuncture circles, which are a kind of acupuncture of the earth as a whole. This means on different places in the world, we build structures with stones and cosmograms to relate to the planet and to start collaboration, in the sense that our civilization cannot, yes, that life, the path of life would be preserved, and that us human beings collaborate with the earth to make sure that life has future on this planet. So this is a kind of overview, so that you can refer later in your questions.
So, how about David?
Milenko,
Milenko?
no. For chronological sake, because you were involved with OHO before me, so perhaps if you go, then I'll go after you.
Okay, Milenko Matanović. I was born in Ljubljana. We met in '65, Marko and I, and then I became a visual artist as part of the group OHO. And we worked until '71 as a group, and at that point, I think collectively we decided that something needed to change, and we disbanded. My past took me to other lands, and now I live in the United States, in Seattle, in the state of Washington. And for the last 30 years, I ran a non-profit called Pomegranate Center. And the goal of Pomegranate Center is to build community, to link people who are very different in their ideology, political orientation, cultural orientation, using the arts. And the art form that we use is to create gathering places for communities, kind of community spaces, outdoor community spaces. The way it works is that people themselves identify what needs to happen. And so it's a very different form of art. Instead of promoting my idea, it's serving other people's ideas of what needs to happen in a community. And then we help them interpret those ideas in a design that pays special attention to local features, materials, talents of people, the site, the land. And then we orchestrate, in the United States, there is a tradition of barn raising, when people come together to build things together. So at the end, people work with us to create such places. So it's more about community organizing and community building, but it's using art because it miniaturizes these complex processes that are happening into very tiny little actions. And so, in any case, I retired, semi-retired from the role of building such parks, and now, like Marko, I spend more of my time lecturing, training other people, writing, and meeting with colleagues around the world who are also interested in this connection between art and democracy building, how the two are interrelated. So I will say more from there on. David, you're on.
Okay. Yeah, I was the latest to join this particular group. I traveled to Slovenia in 1967. From America, I grew up in America, in Denver, Colorado. I explain to people when they ask me why I landed up in Slovenia, in a socialist country. I told them that I took a dart and threw it on a map, and it landed on the country of Slovenia, and so I moved to Slovenia. But in reality, this was during the Vietnam War, and I was not too excited about the prospect of being drafted and going to Vietnam. So I had previously lived in former Yugoslavia with my father, who was working with the United Nations there, and I had some relatives in Slovenia. So I decided to just move to Slovenia to attend an art academy there. So the first year or so, I attended a very traditional art academy, and I found it I felt like I learned a lot of technique, but it was not very inspiring. And I met Milenko at that time, and he was doing happenings in Ljubljana, and I started working with him. Incidentally, happenings is similar to performance art, as it's called today. We would work with the public. We would present spontaneous gatherings in public. And we also created some visual art, some sculptural installations in public and natural situations. We started exhibiting our artwork around Slovenia, and then were invited to exhibit in Croatia and Serbia. And soon, Marko, at that time, returned from the army. And joined our group. So we were working, and also Andrei Shalamun, who is not here at this time, also worked with us, as well as his brother, Tomasz Shalamun, who's a poet. So we had this multimedia collaboration of artists who were working with concrete poetry, artists' books, happenings, installations, site-specific artwork, film, and at one point we had quite a few people who were collaborating with the OHO group. So I worked with OHO until 1972, and at that time, as Milenko mentioned, we decided that it was time to disband and move on. I was still very young at that time. I wanted to travel and see the world, so I traveled around the Middle East and India for a couple of years looking for enlightenment, and finally came back, and I lived at a place in Scotland for a couple of years where Milenko and Marko also had connections with, called the Finhorn Foundation, which is an international intentional community, spiritual community.
Ecological, yeah.
Ecologically based also. And from there, I moved back to the United States. I lived in Baltimore for a few years. I returned to school and studied art therapy. And so I've worked as an art therapist for a number of years where, like Milenko was mentioning, where his role is to step back from the art process and facilitate it so other people can become involved. As an art therapist, I stepped back and just facilitated my patients to be able to express themselves through art as a form of healing. So I worked a lot with schizophrenics, whose artwork is sometimes absolutely fantastic. Their imagination is just out of this world. So I found that to be a very inspiring process. Worked as an art therapist for about 10 or 15 years. Recently I have retired, so I only have to work one day a week, and I have returned to doing installation art, and I have also continued to do my own traditional painting, which I exhibit in art galleries in the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Okay. I think microphone. Thank you.
How many were you in the group of artists at the beginning? Were you just the three of you? Just
no, it is a whole movement. We started as a movement, which means that people who felt that this is inspiring what we are doing, and they have some talents to do something similar, they were all invited to join. So we did, as said, different poetry, and we printed books lit by ourselves, and films and happenings. So people were joining us, young people who were interested. But then at one point, we were, Asuri and Andras, Shalamon, we are more interested to go into direction of visual arts and to join the international. We realize that in the world there are people, artists who do something similar as us, and we wanted also to contribute. So we formed a 4-member group. A whole group is in effect then from 69 to 71. And we worked intensely as four people, but in collaboration with others, always.
Of course, if you can. Thank you very much.
So, how you are all very young. I have to say I'm oldest here, so it means I'm older than this group here. But it was my really great luck in the time of the 60s. I studied in Italy, and especially in Rome, so I had the chance to meet all Arte Povera and the famous curators like Germano Cella and Achille Bonito-Olivo and many others and so on. So when I were back to Belgrade, I had also again luck to deal with a theater festival, very famous, Bitev, and it means it was time when I invited the members of this group to come to Belgrade, 68. Exactly, we met 67. We were in Slovenia, and from that time starts our collaboration, and I think much more what is important is friendship. I think the friendship is something what means more than, how to say, it's like a family. I think it's like a family. It means it's a real understanding and real love and real collaboration, and we really did very nice things during the years. I would like just to say that that time, the end of the 60s, it was very important time in the world, in States, in Europe, and all around, you know, but because that was something like a paradigm of the changing of the time, because you remember the time of 68, famous the students and the young movements, etc., etc. So it means it was the same in our countries. It means we were part of this big changing, you know, and it means all expression of these young people were similar, not the same, but similar. It means the same spirit of time, you know. And I think that was also recognized by the curators of famous big manifestation is in New York. It was the name
International show.
International show, when they were invited to be members, also to participate on that show of Arte Povera, conceptual art, and land art. So it means we have 2 points very important. The one is real art in real time, in real moment. The second is the life behavior, and using art and life as the same, you know. It was something very special, and what's till now, I think it's part of their behavior. So that's, I'm Biljana Tomic. I'm coming from Belgrade, from Serbia. In that time we were Yugoslavia. It means we were one country. Now we are not anymore. We are states, you know. But I think still we love. And I think for me it was, I have to say, I was very proud
Yes,
to
since
see them.
She mentioned the social background of that period. I was thinking about that you were supposed to exhibit on 1970 maybe at the Biennale, but then you were not invited anymore, or better, your nation didn't want you to participate or doesn't allow you to participate. So how was the social background and the cultural background about the things that you were doing, that they were really interesting, even when I was thinking, when you decided to move even the installation, the art, the visual art from the museum and the institutional places to the nature and landscape, and really doing art with really natural environment and
yeah. Yes, it was not easy. Partly our work of the 60s was also because at that time in Slovenia the art was very romantic, abstract, and we felt that this is all fake, because it was in effect a dictatorship regime. So, for example, I was sent to the mental hospital for lifelong. It was an attempt, and I was 3 times thrown out of the school and taken back. So it was a really, really difficult situation. And so in '65, my 3rd exhibition was closed before it was opened. So I exhibited then myself for a few days in the same museum. It was a kind of, yes, a revolutionary work that we did. At that time, Yugoslavia was trying to be Eastern communist, but also very close to America and allow abstract art, but at the same time, they didn't allow us to come to Biennale in 1970, when all artists that were working in this field came. So Walter de Maria came to visit us from Biennale to make a gesture to take us into this.
And what about you, David? You were the American, so maybe the one that could even bring something new or different, of course, from that culture and that background. How was your staying in those years in Slovenia, former Yugoslavia?
Yeah. It was interesting being the only American or one of the few Americans in Slovenia. I think I was sort of an oddity because not only was I from America, but there is a lot of symbolism about being an American. So in a way, it was really, I enjoyed it because I was sort of like a star. Yeah. I had immediate charisma because I was American even. I think I represented some sort of spirit of freedom for people. I also brought some different ways of thinking that people were open to. And I found that the OHO group and my friends were very receptive to me as an individual. I had a certain amount of freedom that because I was an outsider. Of course, I traveled back to America a couple times and was sort of in contact with the American art world, not really directly, but Oho was very open to influences from America and Western Europe at that time also. We were one of the first groups in Central Europe, you know, in the socialist countries that were open to Western ideas in terms of art.
And I was even referring a little bit to the really the books, the literature that you could have in Slovenia in that period, because I was reading something about you and the fact that at the beginning no spirituality was involved in even in the educational apart from the Catholic spirituality. And then the possibility of bringing back from even United States some books and some literature about other spirituality, it was really open-minding for...
Yeah, this was important that also David brought some books about these modern spiritual movements, because only later we discovered that it was prohibited to import this kind
of literature,
without that we would know. We didn't, in my time, the only book, spiritual book, was about yoga, a little book by a Croat woman who wrote it. And we didn't know that modern spirituality exists. This is also why we then created this Shempas community as an open center. We brought literature and also experiences from Findhorn and from Dornach and different places, so that people could come and get in touch, get to know that there is something else than just
the Bible.
Yeah.
or Tito.
Yeah, or Tito.
Yeah, so I want to jump in. I think for me, looking back on those years in Slovenia,
Thank you.
I became an artist because I was resisting.
Thank you.
I was resisting other people telling me who I should be. Right? Yeah. Everybody was trying, my professors, my parents, Tito, and everybody was telling me, tried to define me. And for me, it was really existential. One becomes an artist because you say, wait a minute, I want to be in charge of my own self, right? And for me, it was interesting coming to the United States, where the balance was just the opposite, the celebration of individuality. The total lack of the other point of that balance, which is common good and the commons. And so in the United States, I found myself working in the opposite way, because the context required that. So in Slovenia, coming back to your question, I was not trained as a visual artist, but we represented Yugoslavia in international art shows, but they would not give me a membership in a club that would allow me to be an official human being, you know. So was these wonderful tensions existed there, where we at once were the face of Yugoslavia in international shows, but internally they said, you know, stay away from us.
Yeah.
Maybe I would also like to give attention to this other side, which is today, so that we are now speaking about what it was, but in effect, in that time, our idea was to create art as a general way to be creative upon the earth. Human beings as a creative beings. This is why we went then in different spaces of life to work. Like me, I am working in economy. We have an Institute for Economy in Geneva, which is called Transform. And we work in effect worldwide on promoting a new kind of economy that is based, it is called the integral green economy, not just green economy, but also integral, which means that all different aspects of society, also culture and spiritual knowledge are included into the process. Like last year in London, we published a big book about green integral Slovenia, because such a movement in Slovenia. And another work of mine. I am 2 years United Nations ambassador with the name Artists for Peace. So I am doing workshops to restore the peace matrix. I did them in London, in Paris, in Jerusalem, in many different places. I developed developed a model. I identified 13 causes how it comes to conflicts. Conflict within the human being, between human beings, between nations, and then between the religions, all these levels. So, and for each of these causes, I developed also a method which is through special movement or meditations, how to work on restoring these different aspects of the peace matrix, so that the causes would disappear, why wars come into being. So you see, I am till February 16 is my 2-year United Nations status. It may be then renewed, but just to say, you know, in the 60s I was working against the Vietnam War. Like in 76, I came each day to Ljubljana once in a week, and I painted on a wall at the center comics related to the war in Vietnam. So nothing has changed. I mean, in my work, it is just the forms, how...
Yeah, it changed the situation
but it is
and
about,
the context, but you
it
adapt
is about how art can interact with the civilization, with the culture, on all possible levels.
But I think that it's even a matter of the language of art, which is a way even to heal people, communities, hurt himself.
Right. So, you know, listening to you, Marko, it's very interesting because my path is slightly different, and I think what I find the most fundamental question right now is that we live in a world that is so complex, such a complex organism, such a complex system, but the habits, how to solve, how to relate to that system are shaped by specific expertise. So in the United States, you may have someone running for the office who is a doctor and says, because I'm a good doctor, I will also make a good politician. But it's like pathology to think in those terms. So the question is, how do we begin to understand these large systems? How do we begin to understand large systems? There are individual paths where I can say, I will improve forever to understand, I will broaden myself. But I think another way where I am seeing a lot of hope is that we start treating each other as points of insights that help us understand that larger system. So you know something, and you know something, and you know something, and so everybody around the table, if we find a way to unearth that, to bring it into the center, without complaining and blaming and anger, then something wonderful can begin to happen. Because some people are attuned to different levels of existence. Some are really passionate about children, some are passionate about the environment, about spirituality. But I think the name of the game is that all those things now need to be put on the same table at the same time. And that's where creativity happens, connecting the dots between those very different universes. And so my work, so being artists, here we are, right? It's so easy to assume art is only travels in certain directions, right? Through artistic forms. But I think for all of us, we found that there are so many opportunities where art can travel now, because it's applying a way of thinking, which is basically the dots need to be connected. Creativity is, on the bottom line of creativity, is just let me connect 2 dots. And those 2 dots are connected with another dot, and so on. And And that gives me a lot of hope that we are beginning to understand the complexity of the large system that we are part of, because we can start tapping each other's expertise. You know something, but you don't know everything, right? We are all smart a little bit, but we're also stupid in other areas. So can you make me less stupid is kind of the name of the game. And so that's what I've been working with, and I discovered that artists can be the biggest problem in that project or the biggest asset, depending on who they are. They're the biggest problem because they think that they know everything. They are right. They're right? And they've been told by professors, you're strong, develop your ego and your PR and your brand and you'll make it work. But this is almost like the opposite of that. It's saying, okay, I know something, but you know something else. How can we tap into that larger field? And so artists, I think, are some of the best people who can do that.
Yeah. I think also the importance of the art in the 60s was that we put away painting and sculpture and graphics, and it is possible, of course, but we discovered that art can have any form. Because we didn't have money, we didn't have possibilities, somebody to finance our work. So we were doing things from paper, from plasters, things that have no value.
String.
Yeah, strings.
Sticks of wood.
When we were not able to exhibit, so we went into the woods and we discovered what is land art. We did land art. And so the field of art opened, but not for art just, but also for how the human creativity can be engaged in any field. As I say, I work in economy or in politics. I created the coat of arms of Slovenia, which is on each official paper is my artwork that Slovenia has, passports everywhere. But this is art, so it opens not that everybody can be artists, but that everybody in his or her field can be as creative as being artist. Before you need to be a painter, of a sculptor, of a graphic, or a poet, and now this is not needed anymore. With this opening the field of art, in effect, we are allowed to be creative in any field, and through this to grow inwardly. Who is doing this grows inwardly, but also gives to others joy and opens new perspectives. It is the same in science. I am also working in science with geomancy. I write theoretical books about it.
Let's get some of you
folks. Can I just, at this point, add something that as an art therapist, I work with non-artists. And one of the biggest problems in doing art therapy is my patients will say, I'm not an artist, I can just draw stick figures. So I encourage them to draw stick figures or just draw scribbles or just pick their favorite color. And what I find is that art is just the impulse towards transformation, and that leads to healing. And it also leads to being able to alter your state of consciousness out of your normal way of thinking, where you're obsessed, where you're anxious, and into being fully present in the moment. So I see art almost as a form of meditation. It's a form of mindfulness where we bring ourselves back to the present moment and are fully aware of being in the here and now, which is a form of healing in itself. And most of the people I work with are non-artists, and if I find that even a lot of non-artists, if you encourage them, can really come up with some creative work. So art really transcends the boundaries of academic credentials, transcends the boundaries of different techniques, drawing, painting, etc. We demolish those techniques in Grupo Ho, those different categorical boundaries in Grupo Ho. Art is the impulse towards transformation, and as Biljana says, art is also the impulse towards paradigm change. And I feel like that's what we all have shared in common.
So I have a question. I know that there is a whole group of you who are studying, right? Art management. Who are the rest of you? Can you just, are you any artist here?
Yeah.
You're an artist, you're an artist. And any critics, any historians, who are you, all of you? Who are you? Yeah.
Can you, thank you. No, thank you.
I am half historian and half politist, studying political sciences. And I was interested by what you said about the relation between art and democracy, and that was one of your fields. And I would like to hear you more about this, if you could.
Okay. So, the three of us, the four of us, the five of us here, laid out a lot of ideas. And maybe afterwards, different conversations can happen. But obviously, I think the theme is that we always thought that these things were disconnected, right? But from the perspective of the table, they are all connected. And that's happening everywhere, everywhere. So you're an artist. We had dinner together. What about you?
Microphone, please.
What about you? At the end, who are you?
Actually, first of all, I want to say that it's the first time I'm doing something like this, and I have no idea, like seriously, I'm not joking, about what really art is and art means, beside having always gone to museums and knowing just the basic stuff that they teach at school.
Consider yourself lucky.
Exactly. I'm actually very lucky, and I thought that everything was extremely interesting. I'm here thanks to him, that he's more into art than what I am. And I work in fashion, so maybe it can be considered a form of art in a way. And I was really, really like kind of pleased to hear your stories and to see how passionate you are about what you've been doing and how you really relate what you've been doing since you started to also your everyday life. It's like you have this belief and you wake up every day like following your beliefs, and I think this is really, really inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a social psychologist. I'm very interested in what you have been saying. And I'd like also to ask, you spoke about a movement. You said we put on a movement. And the lady said, at some point mentioned Arte Povera. Did you also have a manifesto or something like that? Or where did you, in words, transmit your ideas? You definitely work with visual art mostly, but did you also have a manifesto or a written presentation of your position? Like Pistoletto, for instance.
There is a whole manifesto from 65, which is quite difficult to understand.
As all the manifesto normally.
This is how the movement and the group got the name. And the name is Oho. And Oho, this was the book, and manifesto was called Oho. And Oho is meant as a surprise, you know, the Oho. This is the basic theoretical work, which says people are always in their own track, you know, go in that track. If something surprises them, then for a moment they are thrown out of the track. And this is the possibility to get a new idea, a new vision, or a feeling for something. The life is not automatic anymore. And so we were looking, this is one aspect, always to find a ways to make people surprised. Like Andras, who is not here, he exhibited in the Museum of Modern Art in Ljubljana rabbits. He was each day coming to feed them, and 1,000 different things we found out how to surprise people. But this is basic. From this grows also this, what we are doing today is to open aspects that are not usual, to surprise. I work in 12-dimensional space. If I work in the landscape with the earth healing, we are used to 3-dimensional, So I write theoretical books about this also. So it is all, at the basis, this surprise.
So oho, also, it's a synthesis word between oko, I, and uho, ear. So as two main media.
Yeah, this is also a joke we then discovered. But the true, I was with the poet Geister, Istok, when we decided about this. And he said in a moment, oho, and we said, yes, this is it. And now we created this book and wrote the manifesto. And also worked then theoretically on this question of surprise. That the Dada, like the original avant-garde of the 20s, they worked on this surprise. People were mad about, like we had 50 people signing letters public against Oho, because, like, this is crazy, this is no art, but we were happy because we saw that it works. The tendency is like we were living in a socialist regime where everything was defined and the boundaries were set. And so maybe this is why this is so important for us. But it is a general, something general of importance for modern art to throw people out of the track and to become open to new.
So another way to talk about this is in modern science, when they research brain cognition, right? They're now talking about embodied cognition. It's not mind, it's not manifesto that tells us what we do, right? It's a relationship, it's my mind, it's my body, my environment, and all together create what I think I know. And only 10% of that is logical. Everything else is feeling and intuition. So I think artists know about that difference, and often manifestos are written from the neck up. It's only, it's the logical part of that combination. But I think so much of what's happening is the other 90%. And we all, the opportunities to do that are everywhere. Now, what does that mean? Because it's relational. I cannot define anymore, this is how it is, and then tell other people. It's all relational. It's all dancing. And in the United States, jazz is a good metaphor for that because it requires mastership of individual, but also teamwork at the same time. And there's something that's happening there. So I'm against manifestos for that reason, just as a principle, because it gives us the illusion that we know what we're doing.
Yes, please.
So you sounded quite optimistic about how art can bring things together, but I come from the UK where we've seen Brexit. You come from the US where you've seen somebody who wasn't a doctor running for office but thought he could do it. Is it that people who come to this sort of thing and the liberal metropolitan elites think that art can change things, but actually we don't understand where other people are coming from?
May I?
Yeah.
We are in the time of change. This is obviously the last 200 years. The change means also that something is falling apart on one hand and something new is appearing. And this was very strongly to be felt in the 60s, Vietnam War, and this kind of art. It is a principle. Our civilization is patriarchal, and things always, things will go better and better and better. We will be richer and richer and richer. But this is patriarchal. The feminine principle is cyclic. It means life is cyclic. So if we created a civilization that is destroying the earth, this civilization is falling apart. And this is all right with Trump. I'm very happy about it. Because now it is obvious that this is falling apart. And at the same time, you know, there are not just us, but many people also here. They are, of course, who build something new, who develop a new kind of civilization. I call it geoculture, and work very consciously on that. A culture that is in attunement with the earth and with all beings and different dimensions of the earthly cosmos. So we should be tolerant to the signs of decay, because what is not true inwardly always shows also outwardly in the form of decay on the ecological or political levels and so on. But
yes,
please give attention also to what is coming new, you know, developing.
I would agree with you, Marko. I really think that what is happening in America now, and perhaps with Brexit also, is that people are finally waking up when they see how corrupt the power system has become, and our whole economic, political, social system has become. People are waking up, and there's a big, I feel like a backlash towards Trump. So I think that it's all about breaking down of the old patterns so the new patterns can emerge. And I really see that it's the responsibility of this generation, these, you know, the young people here, that you need to take the torch and propel the transformation onwards, because we're at a point right now in the evolution of the Earth where if we don't change now, it's going to be too late. So this change is not only social and political change, but it's mostly inner transformation. We can't just transform things externally. We have to create the change within ourselves, and we have to change our own way of thinking, basically, our own consciousness, in order to change our habits of consumption, the way we relate to each other socially, our political systems, but it all begins with internal change. So the forces of change are very powerful right now, and we have to acknowledge that and work with that to change ourselves.
So when the Roman Empire was falling apart, right, there were people who probably were upset, but there were people in a position of power. Everybody else, there in Slovenia, there are these villages with houses, and you look at the stone above the doorway, and there's an old Roman artwork, right? And to those people, they said, you know, they didn't say, oh, woe is me, the Rome is falling apart. They said, look at the wonderful stone, right? And I can make my doorway out of it. And I think there's a lot of kind of on the compost heap right now that can be recycled for the new cycle. You know, there is a lot of stuff that has outlived its purpose. The music has changed, but the dance steps that we're doing are still the same, because we're used to those dance steps. And I think we're all just catching up now, how to change the dance steps, because the music has already changed a long time ago. We're just catching up. And that's why optimism is okay. If I cannot step on your toes as I'm learning to dance, that's a good thing.
We ask, what does it mean?
Yeah.
So, who is answering?
Positive or negative
yes, it's about the...
She wants to know,
She's-
what the
yeah,
hell are
what-
you going to do with your lives?
With the pretending to be culture manager.
There is a microphone.
Who's going to answer? Up to you. Yeah, it's
Okay.
working.
So first of all, we all have very different backgrounds. So it's not like we are following one path and we are all doing the same thing. Like Laura is from Colombia and she has worked a lot more than me. So we are really different people. And what we want to do there is to create also a kind of network and networking opportunities to be able to create a new way to consider the art and to also organize the exhibition or the way art is going to be presented to people. So basically we want to, well, we are going to be art managers, but in museums or in hopefully. It could be in museums, it could be in the music industry. It's like very diverse, and it's how can we embrace the new opportunities that we can see in this world, and how can we like really serve the art instead of just being, yeah, I like art. No, you really need to have business skills if you want to make it available to the greatest number. So it's how do you make the right choices to make it available to people and understandable, because contemporary art can be hard to get if you don't have the right explanation with the right people.
Yeah.
Not sure it answered your question. First of all, by raising money, for example.
That would
Like, for example, yeah. But it can also be creating a free space of expression in some countries that sometimes don't have these opportunities yet. So I don't know, creating new spaces where artists can just create something new, and also preserve the past, which is quite important. Like, create a kind of communication in between them somehow, just like
So-
here.
A lot of what we talked about in this conversation, right, is this connection between art as a special profession and art as integrated into life. It's just embedded into life. Do your colleges, universities, do they teach you about that? And do you make a distinction between those two principles?
Between what? Between art and...
Art as a in life. Art
Yeah.
that is on its own, right? Is this wonderful thing. And art that is completely integrated in life when it disappears as an external form. In part, what we're saying is that's what's happening right now, is that there is an opportunity to move art outside of those specialized areas into push it in all kinds of directions.
What do you mean? Like, for example, design could be considered as a form of art that is spread?
No.
Like
We're
everyday
talking about...
life.
Also
Yeah.
one of spaces
Everyday
of art.
life.
But I said about economy or politics,
Right.
you know, or community.
Or the shape of our cities, or transportation, or affordable housing, right? All those, yeah.
We're actually, it's not a discussion that we usually have in class. It's not. In spite, it should be. It's
It
really
should be, yeah.
important.
It will be.
Talking about urban development and how art can be a tool for urban development, how to connect countries, how to connect cultures. It's not something that we've been talking. This is a master, it's really focused France, Italy, that's it. I can say it because I'm from Colombia and I'm always debating myself of, okay, I'm here to learn about this other part of the culture, but also to, you know, like a photocopy of, I see this, and then how I can take this knowledge and take it back to my country, and how can we build bridges between Europe and Latin America, how can culture and art itself can be a tool of expression, a tool of also getting people together. It's not something that we're discussing. It should be, but it's not a topic that it's been discussed.
So for example, in the United States, often really ugly developments are created. Ugly developments, and at the end, artists are commissioned to make it a little bit less ugly, right? But they're still part of the problem. And so tell me your name.
Yes.
What is your Marie?
Marine.
Marine. So here's an example. Artists can either come at the end and do their profession and just make something prettier, or can get involved early on and make it work early on rather than at the end. And I think that's kind of one of the many ways how that can be negotiated.
Now, in my case, I work in geomancy, which means I have ability to see how a place is, was the earth meant for this place? Is this a place where the landscape breathes, and the architects would come and would build their building?
Right.
And this is a catastrophe, because this is closing the nose of the earth. So this work would be integrated if I, as artist, would be invited before the planning and would say, no, better we position a bit more to the east, the building, so that the breathing whole of the earth can stay preserved, you know, and maybe we do there an artwork so that even makes it obvious to people that there is a specific place. No, but there is no university, as I know, that teaches. My story is like, I was last year invited to be visiting professor at Columbia University in New York, which is very most known university.
Yeah.
But I was only once, and students liked me. We worked in the Central Park with places, but after that it was all closed, and I was never invited more. So I saw that there is a kind of control, looking that you students are not involved in something that is important for the future, but that you go into the tracks that are proposed by the society.
So Marko highlights the fact that the new struggle, the struggle of now is the environment. For instance, I saw you are vegetarians. Are you?
What?
Are you vegetarians?
Yes, I am.
And,
since 40 years.
And today, one of the most important struggles is the environment and the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So how art could make people conscious of this very important struggle?
You know, the first thing is perception. Oho is also about perception, a new way of perception that is not projecting our ideas upon things, upon the environment, but try to feel, to perceive places and beings and also other human beings as who they are. Because usually, like, we project our idea how the environment is. Always we exclude all other dimensions, as Milenko said. We allow only 10% of reality to be. And this is means blocking the true life powers of the earth and other beings, blocking them. So I think it starts with perception, that we start to perceive the reality as a living reality, as something that is real and not a human projection, combination of human projections and illusions. Here it starts, and then next steps.
I also think that art is a tool for awakening of our consciousness. That we always have to look at our own consciousness first before we project onto the environment and solving world problems. We have to first solve our own problems. So art is a way of awakening perception to being in the moment, in the here and now. And it's a form of mindfulness. It can take many forms: dance, music, all of these different modalities can awaken us to perceiving in the moment. And once we can do that, then we can start working on the environment. But if we're projecting our own anxieties, our own wish fulfillment, our own desire to save the world, which may be totally neurotic and fear-based, onto the environment, then we're doing the wrong thing. We have to first attain a level of balance and centeredness within ourselves and work on our own consciousness, and then we can start changing the world.
In addition to all of that, I think if we all learn to do more with less, it would help the environment.
But more with less, it's an architect statement.
Yeah. But
less is more.
But yeah, we, you know, when I grew up in Slovenia, there was this moment where people had the notion of what luxury was. A car was a luxury, a washing machine, a telephone. And overnight, the luxury became a necessity. We could not live without it. At some point, we need to deconstruct it and say, is it really a necessity? That's what I mean by more with less. You know, there's simple ways to do some things. We can still walk. We can do all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I would like to ask, how many of you here are not European or American?
No. South America.
For European, for example.
Just two of
well,
you?
Oh God, no.
So, I have to say, the first, we have still a lot of prejudice. And for example, when I heard you, and I had the luck also to be in different non-European countries, you know, and I realized that we still do not know who they are. And for example, I think the so-called this other part of the world, you know, like Latin America and Africa and India and others, are so great and big cultures, you know. And I think so many times their desire to learn what's going on in Europe, I am so surprised, thinking, why you are not teaching us to be like you?
Right.
I'm not sure, but in the case of Colombia, it's like we are a colony. So we were taught that we have to be like you in order to be like these terms. You know the terms like first world countries and third world countries is like that. Like, okay, I have to now try to be first world. What's that? I mean, it's proven that that's not the answer. So, but. Yes.
But you have to learn to be what you are. Yeah. That's the first, you know. And what Milenko is saying, I think you are so different. You are not different. That's the problem. How you can say we are different? Look, we look very similar, I see. We have heads, hairs, we are talking, so on. No difference. We are us. We are human beings.
I think that she was mentioned about the
education,
different background, education,
yes.
But even
this
the individuality of ourselves being different is even nice. It's not so bad.
But anyway, for example,
it's a quality. Yes.
No, the different. This is the question of Milenko. Individuality. Individuality, and learning, and who you like to be, etc., etc. There are so many points, you know, to be. So many points. But first, no diversity. We are us. We are together, you know. The second, we have to appreciate everyone and each nation. The second. Third, Europe, it's not only one word. we have to think also about the others, you know. Also, states, it's not only one. We have to look also the others. We have such prejudice about the culture, about everything. We like to be rich, but we have to think that we have also to have a good life.
So, before Marko invites us to go with him outside the Arsenale, and you will explain it, I will do a last question about how do you react when Christine Marcel invited you to exhibit to the Biennale? And yes, in this context, so the possibility of even using the language, the internationality of the art language and of the Biennale to show the things that you did, but even to talk to let the people talk about you nowadays.
Maybe I tell because I was in this process. Christine Marcel wanted to meet with me 1 year before. I didn't know that it is about Biennale and that she will create Biennale. So this was the day when I had my promotion at UNESCO in Paris as Artist for Peace, and we made up before that 1 hour because she wanted to know about Ojo. So we were talking and I was trying to tell her Ojo is not something in the past, but it's a certain way how to work with art, and we are still working in art now. Don't look just to the 60s, don't look just... So she didn't accept it, so to say. She always went back to Ojo and asking me things, but I tried to tell her that this art is alive, and so, but then I was really surprised that really it worked out. So she invited us. I think she didn't know about Milenko's work and David, but she informed herself about my work now. So she did this interesting thing that she invited us, like I'm twice on Biennale now. Once as Ojo, but she put one next to the other. And but she was on the other side. She didn't accept my proposals. I wanted to do more practical things, like workshops also with Venice and some installations to support. I work with Venice since '78 and wrote few books about the importance of Venice. So finally, we agreed that I exhibit my conceptual drawings about Venice and some books, because I discovered that Venice is on a point of balance for the planet Earth. That this is not casual, that Venice is built on water and on the ground at the same time. It is like feminine, water feminine, and firm ground and stones, and so masculine. And originally it was possible to come to each point of Venice by boat or by feet, by walking. So dual system, like feminine, masculine, yin, yang. This is why I am so interested in Venice. And then I found out it is a proper chakra of the world, of the earth, which means an energy center, taking care for the balancing, the whole lagoon in effect. So I am still happy that she allowed me to finally to exhibit the drawings on Venice, even if it is not very attracting work, but it doesn't matter.
So my response is different. So you need to understand that since '71, I have not participated in events like this. So I had almost 50 years of underground. And in the United States, when we do this kind of art with communities, it's not seen as art by the art industry. It's different track. So this kind of invited me back into this strange world of Biennale. Let's face it, it's a strange world,
absolutely.
right? A little bit, the feeling I got in May when I got here was that it was like a little bit like a fashion show, you know? A lot of artists were making statements, kind of a lot of artists making statement about this and that. And some statements are really awkward, you know, about bringing native rituals into a gallery setting, you know? It's like, it's trying to construct something here. I am going to do an exhibit in the Museum of Contemporary Art, and David will also in Ljubljana. So we were both invited to do that solo exhibit, which will be a first adventure in 50 years for me in this official art space. So I've been so dedicated to this art, pushing art into life and communities, that I'm ignorant about what this is all about. So it was kind of a revelation, right? And it's a little bit strange. Let's face it. You know, this setting is a little bit strange, right? We all flew from far away. I just came from Seattle on the airplane, and we're talking about environmental mindset, and I contributed to great devastation just by being here. You know, but those ironies exist here. I think that I was personally disappointed by our display of art, our art from 50 years ago, because this last 30 years of my life was not registered. Yeah. So I think David and I kind of like to tell people we're not ghosts, we're not history only, we're still alive.
But that's why you are at the open table.
And that's why it was nice.
That you are still
and that's
alive.
one of the gifts, you know, to be in this kind of conversation and wrap up some of these different parts of our lives and make sense of them in a different setting.
And I'd just like to add that, yeah, all three of us are still doing art after 50 years, and it's become a part of our life. And a lot of the principles that we used in OHO and a lot of the things that we discovered still inform our work. I mean, the play, experimentation, collaboration, testing the boundaries and transformation, healing, all of those concepts are still very much part of our work as artists. So we are really showing a continuity for the last 50 years. And for me, Venice has been a really positive experience, coming from America to a place like Venice where art informs everything. It's such an aesthetic place, and it's such a beautiful place. I find Venice really inspiring. I think it has soul, it has history, and the fact that the Biennale has been in existence for over 100 years, that the community of Venice would commit to maintain this institution for so long and make it part of its whole cultural fabric is really impressive to me. I think Christine's show has been sort of a departure from some of the past Biennales, which are more sort of ideological and political. And I think that her approach is much more eclectic and open-ended. And I really like the fact that she's included a lot of like third world cultures and a lot of non-traditional, you know, non-art world approaches like OHO. I mean, you know, we're not really like high art world names, but she has appreciated us enough to invite us here. So my experience has been very positive.
So, thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to the artists, to the other artists attending the open table. And please join the Biennale and wait for the proposal of Marko. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.